Hello, and welcome to Release Readiness Live. I'm Elna Miller, your Release Readiness champion. We are broadcasting from our home studios this week as we bring you some of the new features from the Summer 20 release. After our product managers give the highlights, we'll take some of your questions live and on the air. So we will be monitoring both the Release Readiness Trailblazers community as well as Twitter. So if you do have a question, please post it in one of those places. Use the hashtag Salesforce Live. And if you can ask the question earlier in the webcast, that would be really helpful. If we don't get your question live and on the air, don't worry, we will follow up with you within the next few days. All of our webcasts will be available for later viewing on the Salesforce Live website. Now, we may be talking about the roadmap or making some forward-looking statements. So please make sure that any purchasing decisions you make are based on currently available functionality. Now let's dive into Lightning Flow and meet our product managers.
Thanks, Elna. Hi, everyone. My name's Diana Jaffe, and I'm a product manager here on the Flow Platform Automation team. I'm going to tell you about some of our exciting new features in Summer 2020. To kick things off, I'm going to talk to you about how we kick off some of our flows. If you've been paying close attention to our last few releases, you may have noticed that we keep adding new ways to trigger flows. It's our goal to bring flow to you wherever you need it most. In our winter release, we introduced scheduling capabilities as well as the ability to run a flow on a batch of records. Next, in spring, we added our before save trigger, which allows you to quickly update fields on a record as it's being created or updated. And today, I'm so excited to share that this release has two new ways to trigger flows, our after save trigger and our platform events trigger. So when you create a new record update flow, you'll be given a few options. You can choose whether the trigger will fire on create, on update, or both, and you can also choose before the record is saved or after the record is saved. You will also need to choose what kind of object will trigger the flow. In this case, I'm using an employee object. So this is a before save trigger, which we already support, and it's going to check some data and make some updates to the employee record as it's being saved. So if it's a new employee, it's going to assign a new value to the I-9 field on the record that triggered the flow. Now, before save triggers are great because they are extremely fast and efficient. So these can run 10 times faster than doing the same kind of operations in Process Builder or in Workflow Rules. But what about this new after save functionality? Well, I want you to pay attention to the elements here on the left. This is what you can do in a before save trigger, but if I switch over to an after save trigger, you'll see that there are several more options. So in after save triggers, you're able to make edits or deletes on other records in the system, not just the specific record that triggered the flow. And you're going to be able to call and use all your invocable actions as well. So what I have here is a triggered flow that runs every time a new opportunity gets created. What it's doing here is grabbing a reference to another opportunity record that I've already created as a template, and it's going to clone the tasks associated with that template. So we've branched it in order to have separate tasks depending on whether it's a new business opportunity or an existing one. So if I switch over to my console, you can see what these templates look like. This one has a bunch of tasks queued up for my user. Schedule a customer call, review with the account team, and draft a customer story. So if I create a new opportunity and fill in all the required fields, you can see that this new opportunity has copies of all of those tasks added to this new record without any additional work by me, the user. I could also use this after save trigger to send out an email, to update other existing records, or to integrate with an external system. Now, if you're an Apex whiz, you are probably already familiar with the concepts around before save and after save. But if you're like me, and you're a little newer to this world, you might be wondering which option to choose. Here's a quick cheat sheet. If you're only updating the record itself, which is a lot of what we see people use workflow rules or simple processes for, then you should definitely use before save. You'll get the best and most efficient performance this way. As a product manager, it's great to be able to point out that 10x number, and it really is what we recommend. If you have other tasks you want to accomplish, like updating other records or calling invocable actions, then we definitely recommend using aftersave. And if you need to do everything on this list, then feel free to use both kinds of flows on the same object. The other new trigger we have for flows in this release is our platform event triggers. This allows you to subscribe a flow to a platform event and trigger the flow every time the event fires. In this case, I'm going to create a flow for when my smart printer tells me it's low on ink. With one click, my flow will trigger every time it gets notified of low ink, and at this point, I have all the flexibility Flow has to offer. I could notify the repair shop with an action, use a create record to order more ink, or loop through affected employees and send them an email with an alternate printer location. Before we leave platform event triggers behind, there's one more tip I want to leave you with. Triggering a flow with a platform event effectively allows you to subscribe to an event, but you can also use a create records to publish an event. Salesforce platform events support standard objects, which means that creating a record of that object type will publish that event. So you'll see that my system has several objects with event in the title, and I can use these to publish something like a case change event. So that's a quick demo of how you can get both pub and sub, publish and subscribe for Salesforce platform events in Flow. I do want to remind you that you should never publish the same event you subscribe to in the Flow, because you will effectively put yourself in an infinite loop where you keep publishing and then recalling the same flow over and over. So those of you who have used Process Builder a lot in the past may be looking at these new triggers and saying, those look familiar. They also exist in Process Builder. So what's left? When should we use Process Builder and when should we use Flow? Well, I would say that Process Builder and your existing processes aren't going anywhere, but we believe Flow is the future, and that's where we're investing our time and energy. It's our goal to get Flow to the point where you don't have to switch between different automation tools if you don't want to. Now, we aren't quite there yet, but as you can see by the new trigger functionality, we are getting closer. Flow also has a lot of things to offer beyond what Process Builder can do today. Even our list view, which lists out all the flows in the system, has a much better set of functionality. And if you haven't turned on this new view yet, I highly recommend it. But there are a few things that still only work in Process Builder today. So I want to highlight two of them. If you use scheduled actions heavily in Process Builder, you may not be able to recreate all of that functionality in Flow. There are a few cases where scheduled flows can replicate some of the same behavior, but it's not exactly the same. Also, for these record update triggers like before save and after save, Process Builder has more functionality around keeping track of these records and doing logic based on what's changed from before the update was triggered. So those are the two cases where I would say it's still best to rely on Process Builder, but don't forget that Flow is the future. I've just told you about some of the new ways you can trigger flows, but we haven't forgotten about those of you who are already building with our current Flow functionality. One small improvement that we've made, which I think is going to be a big hit with those of you who work a lot with screen and auto-launched flows, is an update to how we handle flow input variables. So here I am on a Lightning app builder page. In this instance, I've created a custom record page tailored for a support engineer reviewing an open case. Let's say I have a flow which allows our support person to update the case and notify the case owner if a follow-up is required. I'm going to drag the flow component over to this right-hand panel, and it's already autofilling my chosen flow for me. Now I want the flow to know what page this is that I'm clicking from. In this instance, I want to pass in the case the engineer is looking at so the flow can access all the relevant information. If you've added flows in quick actions or a lightning page like this before, you may remember that you were only able to pass in a line of text. So you had to go and create a text input variable like this one, pass in just the record ID, and then use a get records inside your flow to actually reference any of this data. Well, now we've made it much simpler and less error prone. We detect when you have an input variable that's a record. In this instance, I have a case record variable, and by checking this box, we will automatically pull all the associated record information from this page into my flow. If you combine this with the improvements we've made in previous releases with what we call automatic output handling, then you really don't need to do any extra work when dealing with variables. Let me take you over to this flow in Flow Builder and show you what I mean. Here's the screen flow I just embedded into my Lightning page. You can see in my manager that I only have to create a single variable which says I need a record of type case in order for this flow to work. I'm then able to use this for all kinds of things in my flow. You can see in my screen that I can grab the name of the associated account. And here in my action, I'm able to grab the owner's email and send them a notification. Combined together, these improvements make it much easier to handle variables and get to building your flow. While we're here looking at this flow, I want to take a moment to highlight a more advanced feature that we've also added in this release. In our spring release, we've added something called System Context, which allows you to elevate your end user permissions while they are running a flow. If you haven't watched the Release Readiness Live video from Spring, I highly recommend it. Tim Pang does a great job explaining the in-depth details of how System Context works. The update I have to share now is that we've extended this functionality to include System Context without sharing, which allows you to create a flow where you can elevate your user permissions to all data in the system. Let's say, for example, I wanted to make my flow allow my support engineer to make order updates or apply discounts, something they wouldn't normally have permission to do. I could use this setting to allow them to only see or edit certain records within the context of this flow, without needing any access to that data once they've closed that individual flow run. This is a great way to make your flows more powerful without complicating your org-wide permissions everywhere. However, since this does involve elevating permissions, we recommend being thoughtful and ensuring any flows you run in this context meet your security standards. I recommend watching Tim's explanation and reading our documentation for all the details. Now, I'm not quite done with this flow yet. We've added a lot of rich new functionality to our debug experience. If I go to debug this flow, you'll now see that we've added an ability to choose different records to test as your inputs. So remember how I'm going to have this flow embedded on all my case record pages? Now I can click here and select different records to debug with in order to make sure it works with lots of different data samples. So I can go back, change my inputs, and run my flow with a different record to verify my design. This gives you the chance to test the boundaries of your flows in different conditions and with different sets of data. So these are a few of the ways we try to make it easier and more reliable to build flows, but I'm not done talking about your debugging just yet. So I've now switched to a simple scheduled flow. This flow runs every day at 2 a.m. and it looks for all the open opportunities. When it runs, for every opportunity it finds, it's going to open the associated account and make a simple update. On the account object, I've created a custom number field called pressure, and every day the schedule is going to add 1 to this number for every open opportunity. So the new feature we've added to scheduled flows is that they now run in the debugger, so I can go and click debug. And I'm able to run my scheduled flow. You can see in my log that I'm able to start the flow, find the account, and update the pressure by 1. So if I switch to my account and hit refresh, you can see my changes reflected there, and the pressure is now set to 2. So a question you might be asking is what's actually being run when I debug a scheduled flow? Is it all the records? If not, which ones does it pick? So first we look at our filter conditions, and we'll only run if there's data in the system that matches them. If there's more than one applicable record, which is usually the case, we'll pick the record that was created the earliest. That way, if I do multiple runs, I can have a consistent experience running against the same record as I made changes. So that's great news, our flow is working as intended. But there's actually another new feature here I want to highlight. When I run debug, I can now select this option to enable rollback mode. And what this is going to do is, as the name suggests, roll back any changes I make to my Salesforce data while I'm using the debugger. So if I hit run, you'll see the same logs where we got the record and add 1, but you'll also see this new item at the end where no actual changes were made to my account. So over here on my account, the pressure was at 4, and after I refresh, you'll see that the pressure has stayed at 4. So no matter how many times I hit run, it won't actually update the record. That +1 will always be rolled back. This is super useful for flows that update records. It can allow you to run a bunch of tests in a row without needing to refresh your sample data, and it can prevent overlapping test errors where a previous test skews your data and changes the results if you run it again. I'm really excited to tell you about this, but because rollback can imply a lot of different things, I also want to let you know about all the nuances and caveats here. So again, rollback mode will work for all the changes you've made to your records during the course of your flow. However, there are a few outcomes that won't roll back in the same way. If you have something calling a third-party service, we don't block those from executing in rollback mode. So if your flow sends a message to a Slack channel, that message will be sent. Some invocable actions won't work with rollback mode enabled, so I definitely recommend testing this out with your specific actions. If it does have conflicts with rollback mode, we will generally stop the flow, do a rollback on any changes made prior to that action, and update your debug log with the details. Lastly, rollback mode is unfortunately not available in ScreenFlows, and that is just due to the more complex nature behind how ScreenFlows make changes to your records. And before we move on, I know I don't have to tell any of our talented Flownatics this, but rollback mode is not licensed to build and test flows in a production environment with abandon. So while rollback mode gives you a lot of great new freedom and reliability in your testing, I need to do my PSA and remind you that it's best practice to build and test your flows in a sandbox org before activating them in production. So please always debug responsibly. Are you tired of Flow yet? Because I'm not. We've already covered a ton of great new features. I just have one more thing to show you before I hand this off to Alex. So we've talked about starting a flow, changes to building your flow, and how you can use new debug tools to test them, but there's one more piece of this puzzle, and that is actually running your flow. How do you know how well they are working? How do you track them? So the last new feature I have to show you is that starting now in our summer 2020 release, we are sending you custom reports of how your ScreenFlows are being used. So this is really useful for a variety of issues. Let's say you want to track the rollout of a new flow. This report can let you know when users are running into errors. It can also be really helpful to have you quantify how well these flows are being adopted because you have real facts and figures at your fingertips. You can use the report subscription functionality to look for trends, send weekly updates to your business partners, or track certain key behaviors in your system. Lastly, you're also able to combine multiple reports and create rich visual dashboards like this one we have here. I think it demonstrates not only the kinds of cool visualizations you can create, but also the range of information this data provides. So up here, I have some super high-level summaries that tell me how many flows have run or calculated averages. But down here at the bottom, you can see that I'm logging a ton of incremental detail. So I can see how long a particular flow interview took a particular user on a particular page, even if they were there for less than a minute. So we hope this gives you a ton of power and flexibility to really see the kind of impact flow has in your organization. We'd definitely love to hear from you if this data yields some interesting and useful insights. So I recommend taking these reports out for a spin and would love to see you in our Lightning Flow community, sharing what's been most helpful, what you've learned, and what other pieces of data would help supercharge your flow management. And now I'm going to pass it over to Alex, who's going to tell you about even more of the new and exciting things we have coming in Flow.
Hi, I'm Alex Edelstein, Product Manager of Flow and Next Best Action, coming to you from my mother-in-law's sewing room in beautiful Marin County. And I'm going to share with you some of the other great new things that are coming this summer.
I'm going to show you a new lookup component that you can use with your flows. Now, placed in Screen Builder, it looks pretty normal. Let me draw your attention to the right side of the Screen Builder, though. When I click on this component, a custom property editor appears. If you're a developer, think of a custom property editor as a way that you can provide a custom graphical user interface to the code that you write. Next example, Dual List Box. This installable extension supports multiple data sources. You can pump upstream flow data into Dual List Box or simply type in your own strings. It also supports ordering in multiple select, and the custom property editor makes all of that power easy to configure. The third screen component I want to show you is called Quick Choice. It builds on Flow's native pick list and radio button capabilities, providing extra features like dynamic default selection, record type-based filtering, and a new visual card mode. Now, in addition to these LWCs, you can also apply custom property editors to flow actions. A flow action, also known as an invocable action, is really just an Apex class that's configured to expose its inputs and its outputs to Flow and other builders like Bot Builder and Strategy Builder. Here's an example. If you're familiar with Flow's out-of-the-box send email action, you may know that it's not very powerful. But the Flow community has risen to that and provided a send rich email action that you can add to your org to add attachment support, add support for rich text, and add support for classic and Lightning email templates. Now, this is what Send Rich Email's property editor looked like in Spring 20. That's a little intimidating because it's automatically generated, but this is what Send Rich Email's property editor looks like in Summer 20. All of the power and elegance of Lightning Web Components is harnessed to deliver an elegant, easy-to-use user experience.
Now, there are other parts of Flow that are getting easier to use as well. And to get a report on that, let's go to the backyard and talk to Marin Gardener Alex.
Gardening, Alex, growing vegetables and other things like fragrant herbs in Marin is really easy, and so is automatic output handling in Flow. In Summer 20, you can also use automatic output handling in subflows. You no longer need to create variables to handle your loop iterators. And so in general, we are continuing to simplify the Flow experience. Sewing room, Alex, back to you.
Next, we're going to talk about some small but useful changes to next behavior. And to hear about that, we're going to the kitchen to talk to Super Dad Alex.
Super Dad Alex here to talk about changes to next behavior. When you click the next button to transition to a blank screen, we've changed the way it works so that it always recalculates the inputs of any Lightning screen components on that screen. Previous behavior remains unchanged. Flow will always try and remember what you entered into that flow screen.
Thank you, Super Dad Alex.
In Summer 20, we extend the support of generic S objects to both flow actions and flow screen components. What this means for developers is that you can now build components that work with any collection of incoming Salesforce records. And what this means for admins is a whole new set of tools and extensions that you can add to your flows to make them more effective and more powerful. Let's take a look at the next demo, which features some of this generic S object support. And for this, we're going to go back to San Francisco and T-shirt Alex.
Flow now works great with spreadsheets. That's because of more new things that you can install into your org. In this case, Narendra Singh, Force Panda, and Adam White and Reagan Walker from CapTech, one of Salesforce's great integration partners, built actions and components to enable this next flow. You'll want to pay attention because it's not just a demo, it's a showcase of actions and components you can add to your own org. Now the flow starts with a familiar file upload component, and I can use that to select a CSV file, the typical output from a desktop spreadsheet. But then the flow uses an action to convert that spreadsheet data into Salesforce records, in this case, accounts. And it then uses a flow screen form to make it easy to assign an owner to all of these nascent accounts before putting all of that information in a new data table created by Flow MVP Eric Smith. I use that data table's point and click capabilities to filter my list, and then the results
get additional processing before I convert them into a new CSV for download. In particular, I'm using an action called map collection to overwrite all of the ratings, setting them to cold. And I can do that without any looping. Once I'm done, I can download this new CSV using the new file download component, and we're ready to move on.
Flow has good query tools, but sometimes you need the power of SQL. Let's look at an example. Suppose you want to create a flow that automatically deletes files associated with specified records when those files are more than a certain number of months old. In order to do this, you need to do a query on content document links, and you need to use a subquery to accounts. Now I'm going to do this in Flow. And I do this by setting up my SQL query in a text template and then passing it to an installable flow action called execute SQL. This action takes
any legal SQL
query and returns a collection of records suitable for further processing in Flow. So that's pretty powerful, but Flow takes it one step farther. When you install this package, you also get a graphical SQL query builder that can be placed in any flow screen to provide dynamic SQL query generation in a simple point-and-click way. Let's turn from SQL to searching. This installable search component built by Gravity Lab in New Zealand shows off the power of fuzzy searching. It searches not just across multiple fields, it even searches across multiple objects.
Let's highlight some of the other new tools that the Flow ecosystem is making available. You can now add a screen component to your Flow screen that retrieves and deploys metadata. And one place that's being put to use is a new conversion utility that converts Process Builder processes to Flow Builder flows. Here to tell us more is T-shirt Alex.
Let's take a look at one of those conversions. I'm going to convert this Process Builder process using a flow. It's an installable flow, something that you can install and take advantage of. I first select the process I want to convert, and it then retrieves it, modifies it, and deploys a new flow. I can refresh my flow list, open it up, and see all of my actions and decisions in the Flow Builder environment. Now I want to finish off the manageability section, show you a new tool that just hit the community. It's called Flow Auto Test, and it generates tests that test flows. I'm talking about real Apex tests, test classes you can insert into your deployment automation. Suppose you have a flow that validates that the right kind of fruit is getting ordered. Peaches, they're okay, and this flow returns true. But if you try and put through an apricot order, this flow doesn't like that and returns false. Here's the simple flow, and you can see how it does its basic validation to make that decision. So you've got this flow. Now, wouldn't it be nice if you could automatically generate test coverage for it? Well, let's do that right now. Here, I'm creating a test, and I start by setting up my test input for apricot, and then I set my test expression. Apricot goes in, I expect the result to be false. What happens next is really magical. This flow uses the power of flow actions to generate an entire Apex test class. You can see it right here, and it's deployed, and we can run it and verify that apricot gets passed in and false gets passed out. So let's suppose that months later, some well-intentioned admin in another part of the organization decides that this flow would really be great if it supported apricots too. They don't tell you about it, but they go and they save the change and they activate the flow. What happens next? When your deployment automation runs, this test will run. The test hasn't changed and it will fail, notifying you that something's wrong because this flow that you haven't touched in months is now returning unexpected values.
Let me briefly mention some additional flow actions that provide new functionality to your flows. If you've got junction objects, you can use getLookUp to retrieve all of the records that have a junction relationship to your target record. If you're working with related items, the new deep clone action allows you to easily and immediately clone a record with one or more of its sets of child-related records. If you're working with asynchronous actions, for example, you want to be able to do a call out after a scheduled trigger fires, you can use launch flow dynamically. Basically, it allows flow 1 to launch flow 2 in a separate asynchronous transaction. You can also install the Collection Actions package, a collection of actions that all focus on either modifying or inspecting every member of whatever collection of records you pass to them. And this is really great for creating data processing pipelines. The Collection Actions package includes actions that let you sort, filter, change values on a collection, count a collection, extracting the number of records meeting a particular criteria, extracting strings out of a collection with built-in dedupe capability. You can generate a report, a text readout of the different records in the collection, and you can get related child records. You can join two collections together, clone a collection, insert records into a collection, extract the first record from a collection, or simply remove a record from a collection. And now to hear about some improvements to approvals, let's go to veterinarian Alex in the infirmary.
In Summer 20, we've made it possible to programmatically affect the order of your approval steps. And we've also fixed the interaction of approval merge fields with email alerts. Sewing room, Alex, back to you.
Users of approvals will also be interested in a new community component, Items to Approve, that builds on the existing Lightning Items to Approve page experience component, provides a bunch of additional functionality, including support for custom columns, hiding the reassign button, delegate approvals, queues, and batch operations. It's designed to be placed on a flow screen, which you can then place on any record page where you want to have improved items to approve list views. And so you can see an enormous amount of fabulous new things that you can do with Flow, approvals, and next best action. Elna, back to you.
Well, thank you, Alex and Diana. That was very entertaining and informative. So now we have tons of questions to go through. So let's go ahead and dive in. Starting with one from Mark. So he asks, did I hear a few days ago on the Flow roadmap that there are plans to redesign the Flow Builder again? Can you elaborate on that?
What you may have heard is about our upcoming auto layout mode. And what that is going to be is a new mode of using the canvas where you don't have to draw connections. You don't have to worry about the placement of all of your elements. It's part of our campaign to simplify the flow building experience. And I'm actually going to be showing a teaser of it. It's not coming in summer, but I'm actually going to be showing a teaser of it at the Trailhead DX Flow episode next Thursday.
Nice. Now, you mentioned Process Builder, Flow's the future. Process Builder, is probably on its way to somewhere. So can you just talk a little bit about is it going to be retired, or what is the future of that?
I don't think Process Builder is going to disappear off the face of the planet, but I do think we've heard from a lot of people that using a bunch of different tools, going to workflow rules for some things, Process Builder for other things, Flow for other things, is just kind of too much. And on our side, kind of maintaining all that consistency in the long term doesn't make a lot of sense. So what we're trying to do is reach parity in Flow and get Flow to the point where it's more powerful and more easy to use, and then we can kind of help people transition over when and if they're ready. So that's where we're really investing our time, but it's not about trying to throw out your processes. It's about trying to give you a better experience.
Got it. Thanks. Now, Mac was asking for before save flows, when are record validation rules evaluated? Is it before or after the additional changes by the flow?
So the long answer is it's complicated. I will post after. There's a great document called Trigger and Order of Execution that'll go through all of this in a lot more detail.
One of my favorite articles.
I've referenced it so many times myself. So some validation happens before, some happens after, some happens both times to ensure, right, that we're not putting null values in the database where they don't want to be. So definitely check out that article to answer your specific question, but I would say generally system level happens before and after, user defined mostly happens after, with a lot of nuances to definitely check out that article for more detail.
Thanks. So Barry was asking, the current recommendation for Process Builder is one process per Salesforce object. Is that also the case for Flow?
I would say not. I would say that's still something we're looking at and massaging to figure out exactly the right balance of simplicity and kind of complexity on different measures. You don't have to put them all in one flow, and we're working on further improvements to make that an easier experience. One thing is, if you're really concerned about the order that your flows trigger in, you do need to put those in one place. That's the only way to kind of control them. So we see some people use to kind of organize that, but we're not quite there yet, I would say. So it's not that hard and fast rule that we had in Process Builder, but we're still working on how to make it kind of the best. So give us your feedback.
Cool. Powell was asking, does the input record variable for screen flows to run as page components need to have special naming formats such as case record?
It doesn't for Lightning App Builder. It does for quick actions. It does still need to be called record ID. That's what you had to do to pass the string in before, the text. And you also need to name it that specifically for quick actions, but not for the other components.
Gotcha. Okay, here's one from Mohammed. Is it possible to pause an after update flow interview?
It is not.
Mm,
So
that's a good
pause
question.
and subflow are the two kind of core pieces of flow functionality that you can't currently do in AfterSave
Got
in
it.
this release.
And another one from Mohammed. Any plans to introduce before, after delete flows in the future?
Yes. Yes. Yeah, we are definitely looking at that. I think that's one of our top idea exchange pieces of feedback. So that is something that we are looking at
Nice.
for the
Okay.
future.
And from Mac, absolutely loves the select record and rollback in debug mode. Is it possible to also select the running user?
Not currently, but again, you guys are just really hitting on a lot of things that are top of mind for us and that we're working on. So yeah,
this is
great
for the course for this group.
Great
Keep you on
engagement
your toes.
users. So yeah, not today, but point well taken.
All right. From Mark, any plans, again, roadmap question, for admins to be able to add tags or custom fields so that we can sort and filter flows in list views? For example, all account flows or all before save flows, for example.
So I would recommend checking out the list view we have today. You may, if you're in a classic mode or have switched back to an old mode, not have it turned on, but it does have some of that functionality in it today. So go ahead and look at your list view controls. You can add in trigger. We've included trigger now in that. So then you can sort and filter on before save or after save triggers. You can save as a custom list view to look at. So we don't currently have objects in there, so you can't do all account flows today, but you can do that for things like a before save flow list.
This is from Gaurav. Is there a way to do is changed and prior val in before save flows? Just requires a second to get records element.
Yes, that's one of the things that's still primarily in Process Builder today, but also kind of heavy on our minds. So
Gotcha.
We'll be looking at, and in the future.
Now, Squire is asking, as flow becomes more and more robust, it's only a matter of time until SOCL and DML limits will be a significant problem. Are there roadmap items to help with bulkification and limit management for flow?
Yes, I can't necessarily speak to specifics on that or on sort of limit management, but I will say on the bulkification side, we are continuing to invest in that. So scheduled flows are currently bulkified. So that's one of the first places to start when you want to do something in bulk. But we're looking at kind of taking what we did there and expanding it out to other parts of the flow experience. So
I'll add to that. There's a couple of tools in the Flow community that may be helpful in managing your limits. One is called Launch Flows Dynamically, and what it does is it basically uses the existing Apex Future annotation, which really just means that you can have one flow tell another flow, go launch yourself, but do it when Salesforce has some room to do it. And by letting Salesforce have that little bit of leeway, you get a much larger limit. You basically, and generally in my experience, you don't have to wait too many seconds for that second flow to launch. So that's Launch Flow Dynamically. Another thing that might help is a action that was recently published called Commit Transaction. And that works with screen flows, but allows you to do things like create a loop that might otherwise violate SOQL query limits by having more than 100 SOQL queries in a single transaction. It lets you break that up and say, I want to close this transaction and start a new one. So there are some tools you could look at today.
Interesting. So
and those are available at unofficialsf.com, a community site where you can find a lot of these extensions.
Yeah, and it'd be great, Alex, if you want to share some of those links in the community after our session for those folks who haven't been to those places before, because I know there's quite a lot of sharing going on with the Flow community, a lot of admins that have a lot of experience with it. So maybe we can put together a post with all the most common useful sites,
sure,
especially the customer led. Now, a great question from Michael. Are triggered flows slower or faster than Apex triggers?
So the answer to that is going to be more complicated than we can sort of generally say. But I think at certain kind of things, Apex will be faster, particularly for certain lower level operations, because there is a little more overhead in Flow, but it is going to be faster. Flow will be faster than Process Builder. So at a very rough level, Flow is faster than Process Builder, slower than Apex, but that is very nuanced. And if you have a really complex or heavy operation, it'll probably be about parity. It's really if you're doing kind of really quick low level stuff that our tests are going to show that Apex is faster.
Yeah, in other words, you'd have to get to a certain point before you would actually notice the difference.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. One from Hongda. What's the caveat about using unofficialsf.com? Why are they not in the App Exchange?
Well, unofficialsf.com has a lot of extensions that are presented as either open source, where you can use it, but you have to be comfortable taking like an Apex class and pasting it into your org, or unmanaged packages, which are kind of the same way. Now, App Exchange has a level of security review for everything that goes onto it. So if the safest tools are always going to be at App Exchange, but there are also some bars to getting things into App Exchange. So we like the fact that there's a sort of range of opportunities. You can find things on Unofficial SF that just haven't made it to App Exchange, and if you're comfortable with them, they may be tools that you can use.
Great. And then Michael wanted to know, is there a way to track how much of a flow is covered on a test?
Good question. The simple answer is no. From the point of view of test coverage and the percentages that are important, it's only going to look at the lines of Apex code in the test class. So it's early days in terms of incorporating test automation of your flows into your CI/CD systems. We're psyched that we are finally starting to dip our toe in, and you'll see investments inside Salesforce on the official side, so that these early sort of community tools are just harbingers of what's to come. But right now, no, there's no way to sort of get a nice test coverage that tells you like how many elements are actually under test.
Gotcha. Stephen wanted to know, is there going to be a conversion tool to convert workflows similar to the newly revealed Process Builder converter?
Well, the Process Builder conversion tool that you saw was a community tool, and I would not be surprised if the community adds more functionality, especially as Diana and the engine team add more capabilities on the flow side, enabling more things to be converted from Process Builder. I think it is completely possible that there might be some workflow rules conversion as well, maybe that's a challenge we should make to Eric Smith, Narendra Singh, Adam White, and all of the great members of the Flow HANA that have been building and publishing such excellent tools.
Great. Yeah, shout out to the Flow HANA for sure. Now, Wendell, he wanted to know, will the after save flow have reference to prior value?
Not currently. So that is also one of the things we are well aware of that we definitely want to get to. That's something that you can do today in Process Builder. So that's one of the gaps we're still looking to fill between Flow and Process Builder.
And Faraz asked, are we able to launch a screen flow from a field update, or does the after update trigger flow have screens available?
Screen flow.
Screen flow from a field update.
You cannot launch a screen flow from a before or after save trigger, I believe is what that's, yeah. So that's all happening as quickly as possible, kind of in the background, and you could be updating 100 records in kind of a bulk trigger. So we don't have we don't allow sort of UI intervention at that point, but there are other ways that you could trigger a screen flow if that's kind of where you need to go.
There's a couple of tools that you could consider to let you attack that problem. At Unofficial SF, you will find a couple of actions. One's called Generate Flow Link, and another is called Send Rich Email. So what we have successfully done is build a flow that triggers off of one of these new record change trigger events and actually generates a link of the screen flow that you want to launch, because a screen screen flow URL is pretty straightforward. It's your Salesforce org, and then it's like /flow, and then it's the ID of that screen flow. Now you can take that, use something like Generate Flow Link to turn it into a piece of HTML, and then you can stick that into the body of an email. You can send that email, and when that person opens up that email and clicks on that link, they're going to run that screen flow. So there are some possibilities there that you can explore.
Nice. Okay, back to another question from Mohammed. In the new release, will flow execution error events be published when non-screen flow interviews fail?
I think we're going to have to follow up on that one. I'm not sure. We did make some changes to flow error email events in this release and some improvements, but I'm not actually sure about that specific answer. So we can follow up with the community after.
Okay, and then another roadmap question here. Do you plan on supporting fault connectors for decision/assignment elements in the future?
It's on the roadmap. I wouldn't say it's super high on the roadmap. So if there is interest in that, in expanding the use of fault connectors, but make sure that you're getting into idea exchange, which we do pay attention to, and also post about it on the Salesforce automation Trailblazer community, which a lot of the product managers look at very carefully. And if you post like, hey, I really like to see decision elements get fault connectors, and there's some people saying, hey, yeah, me too, like that will move it up in the sort of battle over which of the great requests we have room to fit into a given release gets it more attention.
Great, thanks. And Powell was asking, what is the row count limit on record create from Excel in a flow? I don't think that the Flow HANA members who have created the CS convert from CSV to records did extensive limits testing or tried to push it to the limit. So you should give it a try and let us know. Are you able to break that by having so many rows in your Excel spreadsheet that it doesn't do it? I mean, basically, step one is the spreadsheet gets uploaded. Now you've got a file in Salesforce. Then this action takes that file from Salesforce and just processes all of that data as a CSV file. I doubt it's going to give you that much trouble, but it is possible that we may need to add some logic to handle bigger files. Let us know what you find. All right. Yvonne is asking, can you have a success screen after the send email action?
Well, let's see. There's a couple of different send email actions, and there's certainly nothing preventing you from creating a screen and saying, okay, we've gotten back from the send email action. Now, what you may be asking, though, is does the send email action return enough information about whether it was successfully submitted or not to know whether it's successful? I believe that in some cases, send email actions will generate an error, and that will go to the Flow admin. I'll take a look afterwards and see what we're doing there.
Okay. Stephen wanted to know, when updating or creating thousands of records, how well will Flow work versus doing this via Apex? In the past, he said he was always hitting limits and erroring out with Flow, so he had to revert to Apex.
So
well, one thing, go ahead, Diana.
You can go.
I mentioned earlier a new action called commit transaction, and you may want to try applying that to cases like this, because what you can do is you can create a screen flow, because this commit transaction is limited to working with screen flows. You don't have to use any screens. So let's say you're doing a lot of transactions, a lot of record create, record update. You can now have more control over breaking that up. So you could say chunk it into a set of 100 or 200 or 500 records and do that as a single transaction. Wait till that's done, loop around, do another 500. So there are some tools you can use to attack that problem. Do you want to add to that, Diana?
Yeah, I'll just say I think there's some improvements there, and there's still more we need to do. So take a look at some of the bulk operations and triggered flows and scheduled flows. But if you're running into issues, you have options and actions, you have options in Apex, and we're going to keep chipping away at that problem.
Great. Got something from Steve Moe, someone many of us are familiar with. Any chance that a flow action could be triggered by an email reply, just like an approval email can?
The answer is yes, but it's not out of the box. If you're familiar with Apex, you may be familiar with a capability that Apex has to create an inbound email handler. So what you can do is you can have an inbound email handler. And so if emails you basically link an inbound email handler to an email address that you associate with your Salesforce domain. So you can then give that email address out to people and say, hey, you can send emails to this address. You could have a flow that after a user maybe clicked some buttons, sent emails to this email address. Now, whenever emails are received at that address, this Apex class will trigger. Now, you now have the ability to do several different things from that trigger. You can launch an auto-launched flow immediately. You can fire a platform event and have that platform event launch a auto-launched flow, or you can take some other action. So the pieces are there. We do need to do more work, I think, to make it a little more seamless, a little more push button.
Gotcha. Brandon wanted to know, with the use of flow to URL and send email functionality you mentioned, could that email be sent to a user that is not a Salesforce user to be able to run a flow? For example, an information collection form sent to a prospect.
I believe the answer is yes, so long as you have the ability in your org to provision guest user access. And that, I believe, is mainly associated with our community cloud and service cloud solutions. So we have solutions that are designed for self-service management. And you can put a flow on, say, a community page, or you can put a flow on your own web page using Lightning Out. And if you provision the guest user profile to have the ability to run flows, to have the ability to submit flow data and the like, then your guest user now has this ability to do that. I haven't actually tried combining that guest user flow access with send email capabilities, so I'm not 100% sure on that. But it's a good avenue for exploration, because we'd love to enable that, make it easier for your non-Salesforce customers to be able to take more advantage of your flow technology.
Yeah, that's a great idea. So one from Miguel, I love this question, because sometimes it's hard to know, what to use, when to use code, when to use flow. So where would you go for recommendations about when to tackle something with flow versus code, or a combination? What are there standards in terms of combining flow with code? What would your advice be?
Well, as it happens, we have a guide, an updated guide that we're working on that will be available soon that is focused on helping answer that question. There's also some blog posts that have been made that sort of cover the strengths and weaknesses. If you go and you look at unofficialsf.com, you'll see that one of the most recent 2 or 3 posts references a new blog post by a Salesforce technical architect, and he actually did an updated analysis of which one do you use and provided some really nice visuals that kind of show the strengths and weaknesses of both. So it's an ongoing project to basically kind of help you make those decisions. In general, we're trying to simplify that. We're trying to make flow the only place you need to go. Now, with one big caveat, which is we're not telling coders, hey, stop writing Apex code and instead use flow. Our message to that is very different. You're going to hear a lot of focus on the kind of the interplay, when to you mix your code with flow at that Trailhead DX Flow episode next Thursday morning. Because what the message that you're going to hear there is to developers is flow is your friend. Flow loves coders. And the reason is that you can take your code and you are now really empowered by the ability to use Lightning Web Components and the ability to create invocable actions, flow actions, and take advantage of those.
I think we may have just lost Alex. So I think we got the gist of what he was saying, and I think we're going to wrap it up now anyway. So on that note, thank you so much, both Diana and Alex, for answering all those questions and for the very entertaining presentation. And thank everybody for all of the questions that you've been sharing, and also keep talking to us out in the community in the Release Readiness Trailblazers group, where all Trailblazers meet to be release ready. Thanks everybody, and come back and see us again later. Have a good day.